Dune lovers, I owe you an apology. I wasn't quite familiar with your game. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Carter Walker. I love talking about movies, music, comics, and games. I just got out of seeing Dune Part 2 today, and Dune Part 2 is a movie that I made a top 10 most anticipated list. I think I even filmed a video, but I never really got around to releasing it. It was top 10 most anticipated for 2024. Dune Part 2 wasn't on there simply because, and this is my hottest take whenever I'm on YouTube or Instagram or anything, I'm not that big of a fan of Dune Part 1. I think it's a solid, 3-star movie, and that's me being generous. I recognize that it is so well made visually, the sound is phenomenal, but the characters, I could just find them so boring. I never could get behind the characters in Dune Part 1. The story just seemed like it was too broad, it was a bunch of setup, and it didn't really have a climax, didn't really have a peak, it just kind of ended. And that was just kind of really disappointing. And that was very disappointing for me because I've seen that movie about 3 or 4 times now, and I rewatched it last night in preparation for Dune Part 2 today, and I had to end up taking a 45-minute break, which I usually don't like to do, especially when watching movies. It was just in the last half of the movie, I just had to take a break for a little and step away, which is really rare. I've really never had to do that before, but the pacing in Dune Part 1 just kills me, and it's just such a long movie for me to where I couldn't exactly get behind it. And like I said, it's my hottest take, so was I anticipating Dune Part 2? Yes and no. I wasn't extremely ecstatic about it like everybody else, and I was kind of doubting it quite a bit. Before I dive into everything Dune Part 2, there's been so much comments and discussion online on how good this movie is. Is it a masterpiece of the science fiction genre? Is it one of the best films ever made? Does it deserve all these rankings and Letterboxd, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes? Let me know what you think about that down in the comment section below. I will give my thoughts on that after the positives, so stick around and I'll let you know what I think. But yeah, enjoy the video. With that being said, what did I think of it? And right off the bat with my positives, something that I can really just give this movie is that the story feels a lot more cohesive and complete here. Granted, the first part was such a part 1 that it was kind of hard to watch on its own because you're like, okay, there's definitely another part to this, what's going to happen now? And this is a very satisfying end to that part of the story. And so the story in this one follows Paul Atreides as he is with the Fremen now, with Lady Jessica, and he's trying to get revenge on the Emperor and the Harkonnens for what happened in the events of the first film, and it just kind of follows him throughout that and his journey as he falls in love with Chani, not Dick Cheney, Chani, the Fremen woman, and he grapples with being the Messiah. He thinks he's not, other people think he is. And that story to me was just infinitely more interesting than 90% of what happened in Dune Part 1. Watching Dune Part 1, I actually ended up really liking the first half with the political intrigue, the stuff with the, I can never remember the witch name, the telepathic, what Lady Jessica is. It's Janae Barrett. I can't remember it. It's slipping my head. That stuff in the first one didn't quite work for me, but after seeing Part 2, everything that I really didn't like in the first one with world building and stuff that just kind of didn't make sense is expanded upon and makes a lot more sense in this film. And so it makes the whole saga, it makes the world feel a lot more lived in and real, and that was very much appreciated on my end. And it just leans into everything in this world, takes it so seriously, where there's so much that could just be taken as a joke, they're riding massive sandworms, that's kind of ridiculous, but the movie just makes it so freaking sweet. The first sequence of the sandworm being rode, is so memorable, and it's just so engaging and intoxicating. And it was at that moment where I was like, all right, I'm bought in. There was a moment before that, there's a few moments where I was like, yeah, I'm kind of digging this. That moment, I was like, I'm locked in. I'm done geeking. I'm locked in. I'm paying attention now. And so that was when I bought into the film. And yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. And so for all the positives that I can give this film, of course, it's visually phenomenal. Everything looks so real. The ships have such a unique design. The characters all have their designs. The worlds look so visually different. There's gladiators fighting in a black and white world. And then you go to black and white fireworks lighting up a dark hallway. You go to, Arrakis, and there's visions of other planets, and it's just so beautiful and so engaging that it just makes it that much easier to be drawn into the story. And of course, the first Dune had phenomenal visuals, but this one really just expands upon it with some of my favorite shots that I've seen this year, where I was like, yeah, that's That's pretty sick. The special effects as well are pretty seamless. Everything here looks so, so good. And I just love, like, this is a little minor thing that I really appreciated about this and the first one, is how bloody and, like, brutal these movies are. They don't hold back with the blood. Characters will fight, they'll be bleeding, there's blood stains, you see blood. And I'm like, you know what? Finally, more blood in PG-13 movies, please. Like, you have the rating, go for it, use it. Use it to your, like, biggest advantage because it just makes this film feel that much more real and lived in, and it has like a little bite to it. So coupling all those together, that's like cinematography, special effects, visuals, sound design, the action in the film, everything visually and technically is just phenomenal and amazing, which I expected going into this, which anyone would expect going into this. And so I feel like I spent a little too much time on that already because my big issue with the first one was the story and the characters. And I'm so happy to say that yes, they are in the positives on this side because Dune Part 2 made me actually care about the characters from the first film. Characters like Paul Atreides, characters like Lady Jessica, characters like Chani, I can never pronounce, it's Zendaya's character, the Fremen. I literally just saw this movie. Wow. Characters like Stilgar, you really care about them and you get to see more of their personalities, who they are, what makes them tick. And I found Paul's central struggle in this film to be so engaging and interesting and unique to what this film was trying to tell. Because in so many cases with film nowadays, there's so much Jesus like imagery, Christian like imagery, like the Messiah, like two that come to mind just from superhero movies. Zack Snyder loves his Jesus imagery with Superman, and in Age of Ultron, they kind of compare Vision to Jesus, which is kind of funny. And yeah, I just drew comparisons from superhero movies to Dune, so what's up? But I think that this movie just really does it that much better, probably because it has source material that was written with that in mind. And I just love how they portray Paul's struggle. It was like, wow, this is really interesting to see where he's going to go with this because he's someone that wants to follow his own path. He wants to forge his own path. He wants to make his dad happy. He wants to make his mom happy. And then he finds the Fremen and he wants to please them. And there's this prophecy and there's so many things going all in on Paul. And it's very, very easy to kind of get lost with that. But I thought the film does a great job of juggling how all the characters interact and how they're all feeling. You can tell almost at any point what every character is feeling. And I thought that Timothée Chalamet did phenomenal as Paul in this film, much better than Dune Part 1. And I watched this movie and I was like, yeah, I can see it now. I can totally see it. There's a sequence in this movie where it just turns. Like he's in a cave and the switch is flipped and you actually believe that he's like Paul Atreides, that he's like, I can never pronounce any of the names, like the Messiah of Dune. And it really worked for me and I just loved his relationship with Zendaya as well. It was very believable, very just heartwarming to see. I would have liked to see a little more of it. I do think that they kind of skimped out on that going into the second half. I would have liked to see them focus a little more on that. And then switching gears real fast, I thought Austin Butler and Josh Brolin were standouts in this as well. Josh Brolin coming back from the first film, which was a big surprise to me. I genuinely had no idea. I mean, I think he's in a trailer, but my mind just slipped my mind. And I was like, hey, wow, that sounds like Josh Brolin playing a ukulele in 8,000 years in the future. Man, it was. Surprises like that, and then Austin Butler just committing 120% to this role, just being so menacing, so like unnervingly, unworldly, scary, just really worked for me as well. That being said, I think I wanted to hit all the points that I wanted to kind of touch on for the positives with the technical and the creative side of this film, to whereas I was very impressed with how this film handled mostly everything that it was given. I don't think it's perfect. And now I'm kind of going to get into a little bit of hot water, I'm sure, with a lot of people. Early reactions have been calling this like a masterpiece, like a staple of the sci-fi genre, one of the best sci-fi films and films ever made. And to me, that's all hyperbole. People love to do that for early reactions. I have fallen victim to it before as well. Something that pops into my mind is like how much I loved Across the Spider-Verse from last year. And I was like, one of the best animated movies, one of the best superhero movies. And I just was like, and now it's just fallen for me. I don't really hold it in that much high regard as everybody else. I prefer Into the Spider-Verse. That's a tangent for another time. But I did try really hard to not buy into the hype here and not like hyperbolize. And it was pretty easy for me to do that. I think the way people hyperbolized it, the way people hyped it up for me, I was like, oh yeah, okay, so that's pretty good. I don't think it's a masterpiece. And that is where my own personal opinion and taste comes in. I much prefer the science fiction's sequels of Terminator 2, of Aliens, of, I mean, even just Star Wars, if that's science fiction. It's like fantasy to some people. None of the Matrix sequels, so don't worry about that. I won't go that far. However, I don't think they're completely wrong. I just think that it is really overblown. I'm sure the hype will die down, and then in a few months, people on Twitter will say, you know what, Dune 2 is overrated. Probably a few days, people will start saying that, and it's not as good as you think. It's pretty freaking good. Even I, a denier of Dune, ended up really liking this movie, and I'm gonna give it a pretty high score. One that I definitely did not see coming when the part 2 was announced, when the trailers dropped, when I walked into the theater. Is this a masterpiece? I would say no. Is this one of the best films ever made? I would say no. I wouldn't even go as far as say it's one of the best science fiction films of all time. Of course, my opinions are actually subject to change over time. I'm someone who, the more I learn about something, the more I experience something, my opinions change quite a bit, which is new for the internet and new for a lot of people that I talk to. So that could be a little difficult, but as of right now, I would say Dune 2 is not a masterpiece, and I did have some issues with it. So going into the mix, circling back to the story, I do think that there maybe is just a little bit too much here to juggle. There's so many characters, there's so much going on here to where sometimes it's easy to get lost. There's a moment kind of bridging the first and second act where I was a little lost, and I was like, how is everything going to play in? And it's kind of a disappointment because then characters like Austin Butler don't get a ton of time to shine. I know Austin Butler is not his name, but like Austin Butler's character doesn't get a ton of time to shine, but he's very memorable because of the performance. But I would have loved to see more of like Gurney Malik. I would have loved to see more of Cheney. I would have loved to see more of even just like the Emperor or the Baron. And so when there's so many characters that you're kind of focusing on, it's kind of hard to get memorable, significant moments with all of them. And that would be my biggest issue with this film is there's just so much going on. And I get that it's trying to be a very faithful source adaptation of the book, and it's trying to follow up everything from part 1, which honestly seemed impossible, but here we are. So I don't think it like tanks the movie. It definitely doesn't tank the movie, but it does hold it back in my eyes from being perfect. Along with the pacing, these movies are just very, very... They're not the longest movies I've ever seen, but the pacing in them could use a little work. I don't know why. I usually am not one to notice pacing in films, and then I turned like 20, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm getting old now. But for me, this is a movie where I think it could have benefited from just cutting out a little bit of stuff here and there, tightening up the runtime, because then you get to point A to point B to point C, and then you could even add in other moments for characters that maybe get overshadowed. I would have loved to get more explanation on Lady Jessica, what's going on with her, because there's a lot there that I don't understand. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I've never read the book, so who knows. I would have loved to see more of Austin Butler's character. I would have loved to see more of Dave Bautista's character. Wow, I cannot talk today. That's just my own opinion, and I know there's a lot of people out there that love this movie, and I don't really have any negatives at this moment. I do think that maybe it's a little slow at some points where, again, tightening up the runtime, switching around some scenes, adding, subtracting could have helped quite a bit. Honestly, I was extremely surprised walking out of Dune Part 2. So overall, I'm going to give Dune Part 2 like an 8.5 out of 10. I was very pleasantly surprised. I'm probably going to rock with 8.5 out of 10. I really liked this one. I got to tell you, I walked out of that theater shocked. I didn't think or expect to really like this movie that much because of like my incredible like... I hold the first one at such an arm's length. It's just hard for me to watch, man. The first one is just hard. I don't know. I feel like I'm the only person in the world that's like, the first one is just a little difficult. Actually, Caleb, I know you're watching this. We're the only ones, dude. We're standing in the field all by ourselves. But I really enjoyed Dune Part 2, so again, it's going to get an 8.5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen Dune Part 2? Do you think it's a masterpiece of the science fiction genre? Do you think it's one of the best films ever made? Or are you like me, you just think it's really great and thought it was an awesome watch and love to watch it? Or did you think it was terrible? Let me know down in the comments section below. As always, my name's Carter, and have a great rest of your day.